Welcome to Cinemophile, where we bring you the best in independent, documentary, and foreign films, and we talk to the people who made them. I'm your host, Mike Caspar, and you can find out more about the program by going to cinemophilepod.com. In 2003, 8 young Rhode Islanders create a secret apartment in a hidden space inside Providence Place Mall and lived in it for 4 years, filming everything along the way. I'm going to leave it there because I don't want to get into too much detail because this is an utterly fascinating story from start to finish. And we're joined today by the director of Secret Mall Apartment, and that would be Jeremy Workman. Jeremy, welcome back to Film School Radio.
Thanks for having me, Mike. Yeah, it's a return. It's my second time to be on your show.
Congratulations on this. You were on for The World Before Your Feet, a man who walked basically the entire depth and breadth of New York City, and amazing film. And in some ways, I feel like there's something about this that translates from your previous work.
Oh, sure. I only make documentaries, and I kind of am always in production on a new one usually. I'm very attracted to subjects that are outside of the status quo, and very passionate people who are just doing something because they absolutely have to do it. Some of them are artists or just outsiders. And the Matt Green, who was walking every single street of New York City, there's a through line from him to the guys that were secretly living inside this mall in Providence, the subjects of Secret Mall Apartment.
Yeah, okay. Well, that's a good place to start. Where did you hear about this? Before you answer that, I feel like I heard this story, in this grand scheme of thousands and thousands of stories that you hear and they disappear. This one I felt like I heard about.
Absolutely. Like, this is Providence, local folklore, local legend. So the story is that in the early 2000s, from 2003 to 2007, a group of 8 troublemakers, artists, instigators, they were really angry and pissed about this giant mall that came into their city, Providence, and the Providence Place Mall, because the mall displaced so many people from their homes, and it really kind of reorganized their entire neighborhood and changed the face of their entire neighborhood. So they wanted to do something. They snuck inside the mall. They found a secret space about the size of maybe a studio apartment, 800 square feet, and they decided to turn it into their own secret mall apartment, which they kept going for 4 years before getting caught. I didn't know this story. I heard about it randomly.
Yeah.
I met the main subject, and I spent like a year trying to convince them to let me make this into a documentary.
Well, and the things that you just mentioned about this, the reason that they were there, the impact that the mall had on their life, I think you tied together so effectively in this film. I love we get to know each one of the people. There's about 8 different people that we spend some time with in the film. And I got to feel like I got to know them and feel like I got to understand their motivations and their connections and all of that. But also to tie it to this kind of bigger story, bigger picture of life in a city. There's a lot of things. We'll get into some of those before our conversation is over. But let's talk. I don't think we can start talking about them until we start to talk about Michael Townsend.
Yeah, I mean, just to add to what you're saying, is that people hear this story, and like I said before, it's urban legend, it's folklore, and it really happened. And they hear it and they're like, wow, this is the greatest prank in the history of pranks. Like, oh my God, they lived in a mall and nobody knew, and they brought in furniture. And yet it kind of sends your head spinning when you realize that they were also doing all kinds of incredible art at the same time. And that the Secret Mall Apartment was just one of many things that they were doing. And they all sort of, cross-pollinate and affect each other. And it's really a fascinating story. The main character is this one man, Michael Townsend, who's this very unique artist. He does public art mostly with masking tape art. He's the I guess you would say, the founder of the tape art movement. So it's kind of like temporary graffiti. And he's very interested in collaborative art. And all the people talk about how this is a person whose life is art. Just everything about his life is an art project. And it makes perfect sense that when the mall moved into his town, he wanted to do something that had all these textures and was kind of like an art project. And he turned it into this kind of weird protest that nobody knew about, where they were sneaking into the mall and building this space. And when I say it was an apartment, like it had furniture. They snuck in couches, desks, TVs, a kitchenette. They patched into the electricity. They would watch TV in there and play video games. And then they build a wall around it. And nobody knew for 4 years.
And I think that a lot of what drives the people in the film and why it works so effectively is the generosity of Michael Townsend. I felt like watching him, listening to him interact with others. He is about collaboration. It feels very much like that is his thing. And he was a teacher. Let's sort of weave that part of the story into this conversation.
Yeah, he is a very innovative thinker. He was a teacher of art, and many of the people that were involved in the secret department met him and were really inspired by him as a teacher. He kind of blew up the idea of what art can mean to them. We all think of art as something that exists on paper, something that you put on a wall in a gallery or a museum. And he kind of exploded that idea. And, I think that's what's so neat about the secret apartment, that you're like watching this incredible prank, but you're also like, wait a second, am I watching this artwork, this weird artwork that's sort of only for them? Now you have to realize, Mike, that nobody really knew about this for 4 years. They didn't talk about it. They didn't publicize it. Nobody got to see it. So it was sort of all for themselves. So it's also this kind of like weird inside joke that they're doing for themselves. It's also this act of protest. It's also this kind of meta space that they're almost treating almost like a film set. And it just kind of had all these different layers. So, making a documentary on it allowed kind of let me do whatever I want and kind of go in all these interesting directions.
What's interesting about what you just said is that did they ever intend to make known what they had done? Because they did film it.
This is a great question. So they filmed nearly 25 hours of footage when they were inside the secret apartment over the course of their 4 years. In fact, they stopped filming about 3 years in, and they decided they didn't want to film anymore. But when I say film, let's put a little, understanding on that. They had this camera that they bought, in the mall probably for $100. It wasn't some great film camera. It was shooting, and I'm sure your listeners understand this. It was filming at 320 by 240, 8 frames a second. So it's very, very low quality technically. And they used a camera that was the size of like a deck of cards, and they just filmed everything. And since this is early 2000s, it wasn't a camera meant to be making video, but they filmed 25 hours with it.
Wow.
And what they got was extraordinary. It was just an incredible amount of footage that showed them going in and out of the mall, evading security, bringing in furniture, building a cinder block wall, and bringing in 2 tons of cinder block, all secret and unknown from all the security.
Yeah.
And then they would go into the mall. They'd eat at the food court. They'd go into stores, Pottery Barn, and they'd go, of course, to the movie Cineplex that's in that mall, and they'd watch movies all the time. And they just filmed it all for themselves.
Yeah.
Nobody had seen any of the footage for like 15 years until I started making the documentary.
I just want to remind our listeners we're speaking with the director of this wonderful is not the right word to use, this fascinating, interesting, intriguing documentary film called Secret Mall Apartment. That's Jeremy Workman. I think is coming out on the 4th of April.
No, we're starting to now release in theaters. We wanted to put the film in theaters, and we're coming out in a lot of cities. We premiered at the actual mall where it happened, and now we're expanding to cities all over the country.
I want to go back to one quick thing about the work of Michael Townsend. It's like a Banksy kind of vibe to it. There's a lot going on. And in the film, we see him in collaboration with the other artists in the film going to Oklahoma City. We see them traveling around the country doing these art projects, as well as the impact of losing their space from where it was before, basically across the street from the mall. And that's where this film widens out into so much more about the world we live in. Congratulations on proceeding with this and telling this story the way you did.
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, it's so interesting. You hear this story and you're like, this is the greatest prank in the history of pranks. And yet the movie just keeps unfolding and unfolding, and you start realizing that they're doing so many interesting artworks, and a lot of it voluntarily for charity, for no money, for no
Yeah.
recognition. And it just kind of throws your head in a loop because you go into this story expecting it just to be this like kooky prank. And you come out realizing that these are really incredible artists and incredible people.
And I'm going to take liberty here as the host to to say their names out loud. And please help me with some of these pronunciations, Jeremy. Uh, Adriana Valdez Young, Colin Bliss, James J.A. Mercer, Andrew Esch, Greta Shing, Jay Zangabot, and Emily Ustash.
Yep.
And they're all interesting people, and we spend time with them, and they're talking to the camera, and they're talking to each other. And for whatever reason, they all seem to be able to sync up when it mattered, when it counted.
Yeah, they were like a little tiny like art collective, an art posse. None of them told anyone outside of themselves about the secret apartment. It's one of the reasons why it was able to last for 4 years.
My God.
And all of them to this day are still artists or working in the arts. It's a very impressive crowd.
And that determination and that sort of esprit de corps amongst them, the fact that they were going through some personal stuff, they sort of alluded to a couple of things in the film that they were going through, and yet through it all, I think they saw this as well, their lives were a work of art, if you will. That's how I think they saw themselves.
Yeah, I think also they realized, that the secret apartment was like their special place where they would all come together and they'd feel this sense of purpose and
Yeah.
refuge and vision, and it just all kind of interacted for all of them in these really unique ways and powerful ways. And we all kind of think of those moments in our lives where we remember a time and a place where things were really, you felt really inspired, and I think that was the case with this.
And I don't mean to be reductive about this, but I remember with me and my buddies building a fort in the
Sure.
backyard. That's a little bit underselling what they did, but it's kind of an
No,
adult.
it's not, because it taps into this primal idea that, building a fort and, living in secret spaces and going into these places where you're just alone and you have your own, you could be with your friends. So
Yeah.
yeah, it
Very,
absolutely connects to
very,
that.
very cool. Very, very cool. The film, again, is called Secret Mall Apartment. It is fun. It is interesting, provocative, thought-provoking. There's so much here to like. Jeremy was on before for The World Before Your Feet, another fascinating documentary about a very interesting personality. Jeremy, thank you so very much for making this, and thank you so much for spending some time with us again.
Oh, I enjoyed it, and I'm looking forward to coming back again, Mike.
You have been listening to Cinemaphile with Mike Kaspar, the place where you will hear from the best in independent documentary and foreign filmmakers. Please check out our previous interviews as well as upcoming interviews and special programming by going to cinemaphilepod.com. We are also available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube, searchable under Cinemaphile with Mike Kaspar. Until next time, thank you for listening.